This technical update presentation is an overview of configured password profiles. We'll start with some password security background and then look at configured password profiles components, features, and architecture. Then we'll talk about how to change passwords using configured password profiles, and we'll end with configured password profiles relation to enhanced security profiles, a previously available feature. Why configure password rules? Because weak passwords increase the risk of system intrusion. The payment card industry data security standard requires card processors to implement strong access control measures. For example, one requirement says that passwords or phrases must meet the following requirements: a minimum length of at least 7 characters, and that's one that you can do with standard exec controls. It also requires that they contain both numeric and alphabetic characters, and that can't be done with the standard exec provisions. It also says that alternatively, the passwords or phrases must have a complexity and strength at least equivalent to the parameters specified above, so that includes numeric characters, special characters, and so on. Another requirement says do not allow an individual to submit a new password that is the same as any of the last 4 passwords or phrases he or she has used. Configured password profiles lets you meet this requirement and other PCI DSS requirements that cannot be met in any other way on OS 2200. Here are the major components: user authentication, Apex, and the extended language message system. User authentication, which is known as Flex in Primus, provides the authentication module that contains configured password profiles code. It also contains an @password replacement for @password. It contains a configuration file and an empty dictionary file that you can populate with words that you don't want your users using as passwords. The Authentication and Session Initiation Subsystem, or ASIS, is part of Flex, and it's also required. Apex provides the GUI for configuring configured password profiles, and it also contains the documentation for configured password profiles. ELMS, the extended language message system, provides the user interface messages and the password self-reset messages.
Configured password profiles offers tip, demand, and biz environments a way of enforcing password rules that go beyond the rules the exec enforces. There are 20 password policy settings, 5 lifecycle policy settings, and 4 operational settings to give you a great deal of flexibility to meet your own security requirements. Furthermore, configured password profiles supports up to 32 characters per password, and the character set they can come from is larger. It coexists with other types of authentication. Each user ID security record on OS 2200 specifies an authentication type, and you can have a mix of authentication types for different users. Those users with type 19 will use configured password profiles. Finally, it applies to all security levels from fundamental security on up. As long as TSS control is true, you'll be authenticating users beyond just the security officer, and that's where configured password profiles comes in handy.
Here are some of the password enforcement options and operational settings that configured password profiles makes available to you. To begin with, you can require a minimum number of alpha or uppercase or lowercase or special characters, and you can say how many of those character groups are required. You can require that passwords not be reused within a certain amount of time if they're the same as the last n passwords. You can have the password strength of the new password displayed to the user and then give them a choice of whether to accept that or not, and you can require a certain strength of password. You can specify that new passwords have to vary by a certain amount from the user ID or user information or their current password. You can also disallow repeated characters like AAAA or sequential characters or keyboard sequences. For an operational setting, one of the things that you can do with configured password profiles is require the user to enter his password twice and therefore confirm the password change. You can also provide self-service password reset for the user who is able to correctly answer a certain number of questions that you supply. Here's what the authentication flow looks like with configured password profiles. It begins with the user at a terminal logging into demand or tip session control or BIS. This goes to the communication software, which passes it down to BIS or through RSI and tip interfaces to the exec. The exec then calls the ASIS subroutine, which then looks to see if there's an authentication module configured for this user. If it's authentication module 19, then that's configured password profiles. The user ID security record includes a basic data area that includes the hashed 18-character legacy password along with what other variations you've specified need to be saved for the password. The additional data area, which can hold up to 32 characters of password hashed, is for the configured password profiles use. When the user logs into BIS, demand, or tip session control, the end user's current password is validated, and then when the user changes the password, the configured password profiles rules are enforced by AM19. This is then saved in the additional data area, and it's truncated down to 18 characters and hashed in all of the same ways that it would normally for the basic data area, so that you can log in that way if necessary. Another way to change password is through the @password processor, and a third way is to log into Apex. If you log into Apex as an ordinary user, your current password will be validated according to the rules, and then your new one will have to obey the configured password processor rules as well. Now, if you're an administrator, you have to obey the rules when you log in, and when you're changing your own password, you do have to obey the configured password processor rules. But when you're changing someone else's password, those rules are not enforced, and this allows you to give simple passwords that the user who's just gotten his password changed can remember, or whatever the site policy calls for. The ways that are shown in red here at the top of the screen are ways that you should not change your password if you're using configured password profiles, because they bypass the configured password profiles code and go directly into the basic data area. Changing the password with Sec Manager is one of those, with Security Client is another, and with the transparent password command is a third. Now with this level's release 16, you can configure the exec to disallow the transparent password command if you'd like. The information on this slide is primarily of interest to those who are currently using Enhanced Security Profiles, or ESP. ESP is supported by a special contract with the Support Center, and it's being phased out in favor of configured password profiles, which is standard product. That means that configured password profiles has no license management code, and the administrator can do all of the configured password profiles using configuration using Apex. There's no need to contact the Support Center as was required for ESP. ESP had both a dictionary mode and a filtered word list, which was redundant, and in configured password profiles, it's just the dictionary mode that's available. There are also some terminology changes, such as the term double check being changed to confirm password change under configured password profiles. The @PWD processor is replaced by the @password processor in configured password profiles. And administration, including the password change and login time constraints, can be done through either Apex or TeamQuest Simon rather than the @ESP processor. Thank you.